Jim Joyce, CEO, inventor, CEO of Segan Therapeutics. Their ticker symbol is SIGY.
You go to SeganTherapeutics.com. You see there on the screen here. For our radio audience, just go to our website at BigBizShow.com. You'll be able to find out. How to get a hold of these guys and take a look at the 11 most remarkable advances in healthcare, which is what you invented here. Is that the same thing as this, or is that something different?
It was previously. We started off previously, I founded a company here in San Diego, took it from single shareholder startup to over 10,000 shareholders on NASDAQ. And we developed a first-in-industry blood purification device that was the first therapy of its kind approved to treat a pandemic virus by FDA, and that was Ebola virus. And that was, awarded with a multitude of awards.
Sure.
Top invention at Time Magazine, top 11 medical breakthrough. But that was a first-generation product. That was limited to broad-spectrum clearance of viral pathogens. What we're developing now with Segan Therapy is a device that can have broad-spectrum clearance of viral pathogens, address these translocated bacterial toxins, and dampen down the excessive inflammatory response.
The inflammatory response seems to be a buzzword, just like sepsis is these days. And not to minimize what you guys are treating, but when it gets to the regular population, now it's a buzzword. Something you've been working on for 15 years. Talk about with respect to the sepsis response and the next pandemic that we talk about. It all sort of falls into one thing, because you've got sepsis, you've got pandemic, we got inflammation, we got cancer, it's kind of one long tree. And this is the bad news chapter too.
They're all connected.
Yeah.
They're all connected. And something that was remarkable with COVID-19 was the ability to have vaccines developed within a year. Preventative vaccines.
Let's stop down there for a second. Because what I think many people don't know is that vaccines are a recipe where you plug in the cootie. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time, correct? Am I accurate in saying when vaccines come out, we don't have to reinvent from the start? Because I think one of the big misnomers during COVID was that we rushed to a vaccine, when in reality, and you might correct me if I'm wrong, didn't those vaccine companies just get to skip the line that's how it was done so quickly, or was it rushed? Because I think the FDA is a long, arduous process just because of the amount of NDA that goes out there. So what really happened?
So I was in a program I mentioned earlier, this DARPA program to advance blood purification therapies. Parallel DARPA was a program to accelerate vaccine production, vaccine development production based on mRNA vaccines. And
acceleration, does that mean rushed, or does that just mean accelerated?
It means accelerated development.
Okay, so is that a bad thing, potentially?
Well, if you look at the journal Lancet, they had a publication on the advancement of the Moderna vaccine and then the other vaccine, and they projected that in the first year of the availability of that vaccine worldwide, it saved between 14 to 18 million lives.
Good thing.
So it was very powerful. But what it changed was the environment. Vaccines preventative. What are post-exposure therapies? So historically, the fastest vaccine development in history prior to this was 4 years. And so you would never know if a vaccine would be developed or not. So they were always competitive with antiviral drugs.
So there's the question. 4 years for vaccine development versus 8 months is what we've witnessed in COVID?
It was putting the vaccine in people's arms within the year.
Was that because the FDA was able to assess this, or was that because the science was solid, or we just don't know yet?
I don't think you can say definitively. The problem you have when you have a new outbreak, you use the perfect word, assess. So how do you treat it? If you have a post-exposure therapy, how do you, like we're developing, how do you run a controlled study? You can't. And the government legislation says there's a reliance on animal models. But for most of these emerging pandemic threats, there is no animal model per se. So there's challenges.
So wait a second, so on that subject, we don't know what you don't know during that process.
That's correct.
Now, you're the guy to ask this question to, okay? 5 years post-COVID, 5 years post the beginning of COVID, okay? What would you do differently now, knowing what you know now in your own business, knowing what you know, what we've all experienced, and you seeing, and you have a unique seat in the stadium on this one. What would you do different? What do you think we should have done different? What would we do different next time to make this more, I can't say the word palatable, but make it so
well, I think there's some basic things like have masks available. That's probably a good start.
PPE.
Right. But as it relates to responding, vaccine development, I think, is critical, but with the ability to develop vaccines at a rapid pace, the whole concept historically of trying to also develop an antiviral drug, which starts when a new virus emerges, and that can take 5 or more years, that's no longer an appropriate post-exposure strategy. Right now, post-exposures are predicated on what we're doing with blood purification technologies. And they're also important because they can not only be first-line countermeasures and be available right at the outset of an outbreak, but they also have commercial applications in mainstream medicine. So it's not a countermeasure that you worry about being put in the stockpile and expiring and have to be repurchased every 3 years. This is something that there's an inventory. It can be used for mainstream medical indications.
So what's going to be? So is that the treatment? What's the treatment strategy going to be, in your opinion? And the next is it because you're just talking about having a stockpile, but then maybe not, knowing that we can depend on that stockpile. Well, what's the treatment strategy?
Well, I'll replay what happened with COVID-19. First 4 therapies approved to treat COVID-19. They were not a vaccine, not an antiviral drug. They were all 4 blood purification technologies. One was for pathogen control.
What was that called again? I forget the name of that because I remember that. It was called. Do you recall the name of the?
The pathway was called Emergency Use Authorization Pathway.
Right.
And the first 4 therapies under this pathway were blood purification technologies. One to control infection and address the pathogen itself. The other 3 were designed to dampen down excessive pro-inflammatory cytokine production. Our device performs all of those functions, plus it addresses the bacterial toxins that locate from the gut, leak into the bloodstream, and cause a very dysregulated immune response to infection. And that was not known as being a primary target at that time.
So wait. So does that mean we're in a better spot now than we were? In your opinion?
I'd like to think so.
Okay.
What about
back to chapter 1?
What about the plexiglass shields in restaurants? Do we go back to those too for the next pandemic?
The sneeze guard and the
Well,
salad
because the bacteria would stop at the plexiglass. It would never go higher than the plexiglass either.
His
So
name
that
is
was-
Jim
that was
Joyce,
great.
CEO inventor, Siegen Therapeutics. I have a question for you because I did some research, and this also goes into chemotherapy, what you guys are talking about with the therapy in terms of delivery method, correct?
Yeah, this is a pipeline product, but we were dismayed. We initiated a relationship with some researchers who were trying to improve the delivery of chemotherapy, as well as immunotherapeutic antibodies, and we were dismayed at how poorly these compounds are delivered. In both cases, chemotherapy, typically less than 3% of the drug is actually delivered to tumor cell targets. The rest is off
Even with all this targeted tumor therapy we all hear about, and on the TV commercials and the radio and so on and so forth.
Well, the targeted therapy, then all of a sudden you have an antibody component that can selectively target where it's going to get to. But antibodies bind exquisitely to receptor targets that are on the cancer target. But these receptor targets are oftentimes in a lot of other places that aren't the targets, and those act as decoys that intercept.
So you're putting the drug in
delivery.
place that doesn't belong.
Yeah. So we've developed intellectual property to take immunotherapeutic antibodies, attach them to a bead, put them in a blood purification device, and sweep out these decoys prior to the delivery of the drug itself.
What are you most excited about for the rest of this year, as much as you can share with us as the CEO of a public company, in the next 5 years? What are you most hopping up and down about right now?
Well, I think what we're doing in cancer is very executable, but the clinical study we're getting ready to kick off with our lead product, Siegen Therapy, that's a real value driver for us, because this is a small feasibility study, 12 to 15 subjects, and we successfully navigate through this, then we can bridge into multiple pivotal studies as a device for approval into indications such as the ESRD indication I mentioned earlier, emerging infectious disease, and sepsis.
So in the capital formation problem that we saw in biopharma the last couple of years, you guys have a runway for your studies and stuff? You feel pretty good about your...
Yeah, our cost of running this study is pretty minimal. And we have a good collaborator from the dialysis industry, one of the leaders in the industry there. And we've always been very cognizant of being, keeping our burn rates
Joe.
low, so we can have flexibility to do things.
Well, it's good. I'm feeling better and better. I still feel better than I was.
Greg, you feel okay?
Yep.
Well, I'm all right.
Jim Joyce, CEO, Sigan Therapeutics. Of course, their ticker symbol SIGY. I was there on day one in his garage.
Thanks.
Coming in, man.
Appreciate it.
Incredible
Have you
growth.
back for sure.
All right, keep it here. Lots more to come with the Big Biz.